finals berth here. Let's go.
And remember, guys, you can follow along on flowgrappling.com in the multi-mat technology. Gordon Ryan pulling.
This is the Uremi Ashigarami position, or initial Ashigarami. It's often simultaneously taught as the first leg locking position, leg lock configuration, as well as guard and submission. If you've done Jiu-Jitsu for some time, chances are this Ashi position has been taught or introduced early on. From this position alone, there's a plethora of sweeps, transitions, and attacks available. This Ashi is a common entry point that builds up into other leg lock entries as well. Whether or not we decide to attack legs or advance position, a huge advantage is that our opponents must address this entanglement in order for them to be safe. All things considered, the Uremi Ashi position is pretty low risk and it's highly available. Granted, there are certainly challenges in that position for sure. Now, if the Uremi Ashi position is exclusively for the legs, is there a different lock that can give the same degree of options and control? Today I wanted to talk about the Kimura lock. Now, I've personally been thinking about this idea of specific limb locks that offer a high degree of control. Of course, a Kimura lock and an Ashi lock are completely different things. However, the ideas and the path are kind of similar. Both these locks, whether opportunistic or proactive, elicit a strong degree of control over our opponent's movements. Both locks have sweep submissions as well as transitions available. But most importantly, in both entanglements, the threat of danger continues to grow as long as we can keep our opponents within that lock whilst progressing the position or the pins. So in total, there's 7 different types of Kimura, and all of it start with the figure 4 Kimura lock. Now, for beginners, just know that the most important type of Kimura is the figure 4 Kimura, and that all the other Kimuras kind of build off of it depending on your body position and the degree of control or finishing mechanics that you're trying to apply. So I searched up a lot of videos on YouTube on the Kimura lock, but they all lean towards the actual submissions and finishing mechanics. Well, that's really important. This video by Stephen Kesting goes through granular detail on explaining the figure 4 grip and how to actually lock it up. Now, a funny story here, the Kimura grip was really difficult for me to comprehend and understand. So eventually, once I figured out the mechanics of the lock, I would preemptively lock up and thread the Kimura lock whenever I would be hanging out with my fiance. I guess that's why we're not married yet. So if we do end up locking the Kimura and decide to go for the finish, we have to ask ourselves, to what degree can we get the hands behind the back? Going back to the comparison of the Uremi Ashigarami, the Uremi Ashigarami sets up the threat immediately for your opponent to immediately react, just because the threat of a heel hook is immediately present. In contrast, the Kimura lock starts with control, and our opponent's reaction, whether it be trying to strip grips or misaligning their own body position, will determine the attacks or sweeps that we choose. Oftentimes, the Kimura won't even be the final finish. Now, of course, if the arm is behind the back, we can quickly work out finishes, but generally in sparring, arms don't start from behind the back in a compromised position. So with that in mind, we could see that the Kimura is a very powerful transitory way of getting into other attacks, whilst the end goal, if we can ultimately get the arms behind the back, then we can go for a finish. But along the way, we can go for sweeps and transitions. So one final thing that I wanted to note is that the Kimura lock is very versatile and it could be seen in other forms of submission wrestling as well as grappling as well. In judo, I believe it's called Gyaku Uri Gatami, and in catch wrestling, it's called the chicken wing. The challenge for me learning Kimuras at the beginning was not understanding the context as to why one would roll through to hit a Kimura. But over time, through positional sparring, some of the positions and the Kimura locks start to make more sense and it starts to blend in together. So surprisingly enough, I found that there's a lot of details and concepts that are really important in both the control aspect as well as like the finishing mechanics of the Kimura. And so from that, I would highly recommend watching John Danaher's Enter the System on Kimuras. Now, ultimately, I would say it's a good primer that shows all the possibilities of the Kimura, but I don't think it necessarily does a good job of showing a game plan built around Kimuras. I think other instructionals do a better job of that. Another aspect of me better understanding Kimuras was actually learning about how to defend. Through learning the defenses, you start to learn about the actual finishing mechanics and what to deny. And then from there, it also helped with like the attacking sequences. I actually really enjoyed Craig Jones's instructional on escaping submissions. He goes through a lot of detail on escaping the Kimura. But that being said, I think BJJ Globetrotters also have great seminars on YouTube on Kimura defense, namely some of the Kimura defenses by Preet Mikkelsen. Given how versatile Kimuras are, I'll put it in the category of reactive and proactive methods of locking up the Kimura system. And so proactively, I think the New Wave Side Attack DVD does a really good job of explaining a whole path of attacking the Kimura and then transitioning to several different positions from there. This is the dorsal Kimura position, and in the New Wave Side Attacks, Danaher shows a method of getting to this dorsal Kimura position, setting it up, and then working the finishes or transitions from there. And so that's one of the things that I really like about this instructional, is because it builds a game around a Kimura. For any reactive entries, we really have to study and look at Unifying the System by Gary Tonin. Now, this instructional, not only for the Kimura, but it shows so many chains and so many paths from different types of attack setups and sweeps. The main focus of this instructional isn't on any one particular finishing mechanics, but rather the transition mechanics between each and every attack. From here, we start to learn the relationship between arm locks and Kimuras, triangles and Kimuras, as well as even Kimura entries failing and then going into the legs. All right, moving on. I think the more advanced we get, the more specific we want to start studying our Kimuras. And from here, it'd be really nice to study Submeta. And on Lachlan Giles' Submeta, it shows the Kimuras in very specific scenarios, such as like half guard, getting into T Kimura, and a lot of the transitions from there. You may find Submeta to be really useful in teaching very specific responses and reactions, especially in very specific scenarios. I'm putting this in the more advanced category just because I found myself in those niche scenarios based upon sparring, and then from there I would kind of look back and figure out where I got stuck, and that's where Submeta came in handy. So I'm just studying this now, but there's a really huge relationship between the triangle and the Kimura, and this is something that I started to study and read about in Gordon's new instructional Attacking Triangles, and I think next time he's going to be releasing Attacking Kimuras, and that's going to be a really interesting tie together between the dilemmas of attacking triangles and Kimuras. I've put this in the more advanced tiers just because there's a lot of concepts that build into being comfortable attacking from triangles and the Kimuras. It's something that personally I'm still working on a lot, but the thing is that once one system fails, we can always move into the other, and of course vice versa. And this is something that I want to start building into my game, and that I believe it would really help everyone who studies this diligently. All right, guys, so that concludes everything for this week's study guide. Now, Kimuras are sometimes often brushed off the rug and not utilized as much as it can. And I think a main reason is that a lot of people really focus in on the finishing mechanics of the Kimura and using the Kimura as a finishing attack. When done right, the Kimura can actually be one of the strongest finishing positions in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu. However, an underlooked aspect of the Kimura is the different transitions that the Kimura can potentially lead into and build it into. So that being said, make sure that we study those and start implementing them in our games. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And for anyone who's interested, I will have this chart available in a Google Drive if you wanted to look back and study on it. All you'll have to do is just follow me on Instagram and shoot me a message. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And finally, just remember, if you guys have time to kill, you have time to drill. Peace.